All right, well, welcome everybody. Today we're going to start AVK Tailgate Talk 3, and this is just kind of a podcast format. We're here to talk about the world of waterworks, manufacturing, engineering standards, certifications, anything like that that's applicable to AVK. And, we want to be who the waterworks industry turns to for solutions, not just products. And in this episode, we've got Dan Haptonstall, Mark Tompkins, and Brandon Vines is joining in from the city of Waxahachie, Texas. And then we have Chad Holmes also available. Chad's up in the Boston area that works for AVK. And this is a little bit new for us, this format. So with Brandon, what we're finding out is his equipment doesn't necessarily work with ours at this stage. So he's going to be joining in through chat. And we really appreciate this, Brandon. So at this point, Dan, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody, make sure you're off mute, and just talk a little bit about what it is you do and, what your role at AVK is and your mission.
Well, hello, it's Dan Haptonstall, and my role is to be in the field to assist all the customers, vendors, and AVK personnel with any AVK issues. My mission is to make sure everyone understands how the AVK products work and are happy and satisfied with the product at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. And moving on a little bit, I'll let everybody know if you're a guest on one of these and you're somebody that's actually participating like Brandon is today, he'll get an AVK Tailgate Talk hat and also a shirt. And so we encourage anybody that's got ideas. I've actually gotten some in the last week or two from customers, and we'd love to have you be a guest on a future Tailgate Talk. In the meantime, Dan, why don't you let everybody know how to reach you here? This is your phone number, but kind of give a little background on that.
So there's my phone number, and the whole point of this is just so that you can contact me anytime you need. I mean, that's the whole purpose of my job, is to get my number out there so that people can call me when they're in the field immediately. I mean, you don't need an appointment or nothing. If I can't answer the phone, I don't, but I almost always answer my phone, and to help you through the field. And there's more than one way to do it. We've got the Chalk app where we can look at pictures and talk back and forth. We can do it over the phone, and email or texting, whatever works for you guys.
Okay. Mark, so you're a little bit like me. We've both been with AVK about 20 years. From your perspective, what do you want the people to know as far as what our focus is here and how it differs from when we both joined AVK years ago?
Oh, thanks, Kent. Yeah, it has. 20 years ago, we've actually added, quite a bit of great resources to our portfolio to be able to help our customers in the field. Right now, on all of our extension kits, we now have a QR code, which we're getting high tech with. And what the QR code is you can actually scan that. Say if you get an extension kit and you're maybe not necessarily familiar with how to install it, you simply take your smartphone, which most people have today, and they just scan this QR code. It'll actually take you through an animated exploded diagram that shows you exactly how to put the extension kit on. It also gives you a list of materials, so you'll know that all the parts are supposed to be there. And if in turn you get to the point where you still need more help, we also have a video installation instructions available on that same field where you can actually watch a video and it shows you step by step exactly how to put an extension kit on. So that's something new we're doing now that we didn't have in the field at the time. Again, also with our new website, we do have installation videos. Basically, if you need to know how to disassemble a fire hydrant, how to install a new main valve, all those videos are also located online now. Actually, with our new AVK support website, avksupport.com, you can actually also have real-time chat with someone if you just have a question you need to ask about something to do with our products, or if you're in the field and you happen to just have access to the website, you can actually do a live chat with representative now. And then also, of course, Dan's going to talk a little bit more about this, but we're excited about our new AVK Field Assist, which is an application, an app where you're actually able to interact with someone in the field when you're actually working on a product. And I think, Dan's going to go over that a little bit because he's a great asset to have. Dan's been with us so long. He's operated on so many hydrants. If you have an issue in the field, Dan can normally talk to you. With probably 10 minutes, he can probably tell you exactly what's wrong, and then use the AVK Field Assist to assist you on how to take care of the problem.
Right. So a couple of examples here on the screen. Anybody that's viewing this through a computer, you can see on the screen here. This is an example of what we've dealt with in the past. And, Mark and I have been here a long time. A lot of distributors that are listening in are aware that traditionally we've tried to get on site as quickly as possible and support the customer. However, as we grow and things change, COVID was probably what brought us really into focus. Was we wanted to be able to respond a little quicker, and maybe in some instances, if we can't be on site as quick as needed. And in this case here, this is a hydrant within probably the last month where the utility just tried to put it back together, and they needed a little bit of help. And Dan, I'll let you weigh in a little bit. This is the type of situation where if the customer, contacts AVK and one of the territory managers or customer services reaches out to you, there's more than one way to skin a cat here. So let us know kind of, what you think the options are that the utility has, not just the app, but any of the ways that you can help them.
Well, that we can, we can discuss it over the phone. We have videos that you can go on to YouTube and watch. We have maintenance manuals that you can download. Some want to share their screen with Field Assist. And in this particular case, they just send a picture and I can see immediately what's wrong with it, get on the phone with them and walk them through on how to do the repair.
Right. I think it's a good thing. And I think that that's what this is about today is we just want everybody to kind of understand what the options are, not be afraid to reach out to the manufacturer. We have, as Dan's mentioned, sometimes just over the phone, we have customers that maybe they don't necessarily like to read the instructions, or maybe there's part of the instruction that they don't understand. That's what, Dan's here for, and you can reach out and he'll help you. So Brandon, we're very grateful that you took time today to join in, and we realize, technically you can't have the video or the audio, but a couple questions here. You can just type the answer real quick. How long have you been with the city of Waxahachie, Texas? We'll see what he comes up with here. And nothing yet. He could be still in technical difficulties. So Dan, when you helped him out, can you talk about, so a couple of years here, and that's the other good thing about that is, so he's been in the industry for several years, but, it doesn't matter if you're new to the industry or if you're new to maybe this utility or our particular brand. Dan, talk about a little bit about how long you've been working on hydrants.
I actually got in the industry about 82 and almost immediately got working on hydrants and stuff. And I've worked in several places and I've worked with probably all the brands. I've even sold a few other brands. So I know a lot about how the hydrants work and similarities and dissimilarities and, things that don't necessarily work well with all hydrants and things that work well with, pretty much everybody. So.
Right. And so the thing is, like, this is an example here on the screen. This was a job I had in Connecticut years ago, and the gate valve just, was extremely tight to open and close. We couldn't really figure out what the variables were. And actually, you can see it's a brand new, freshly paved, curbed and guttered and striped street. The city didn't want to dig up the valve, and we waited about a year and came back in and found that the the rolls of material that you put down over when you seed the grass bed on the right of ways. Somebody had just thrown that into the trench. It had worked its way into the pipe before they put it all together, and it had worked its way down to this valve and wrapped around the inside of the valve body and the stem. And of course, that made it tight to turn. So in instances like this, I think, what we want everybody to understand is between us collectively, Dan and the rest of us, we've seen quite a bit, and we're here to help you out. Brandon, roughly at Waxahachie, how many hydrants do you have in your system? And then Dan, while he's typing that, explain a little bit about how you helped him out, because he's not able to really talk about it.
So it originally started about a week before, and he was having an issue with nozzles. So we actually set up an appointment, and we used the Euphoria Chalk app. And so he was out in the field, and he brought up the app, and he showed me exactly. I mean, I actually got to see the fire hydrant in the field, and we kind of went over his issue, and I gave him some suggestions of things to do, and so then he knew where to go from there.
Yeah, so here's a utility. He's got a little over 6,000 hydrants in the system. Rather than us dispatch somebody to be on site, which could have took a day or two to get there, Dan was able to pretty much immediately respond, share the screen. And Brandon, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or whatever, but feel free to type, if you liked it, if you thought it was good, beneficial, anything of that nature. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for, pro or con here. Any suggestions, anything. But so Dan, we're going to, move on a little bit here. And Mark, you can certainly weigh in. Okay. But, let's talk a little bit about, why the serial number might be important on a hydrant. And this is not a hydrant. This is a picture of a indicator post. But thoughts on the serial number, Mark or Dan?
Well, yeah, the main thing about the serial number is, the reason we want the serial number off the top of it is, by that serial number, we'll know the date it was manufactured, the specification of the hydrant when it left our factory. So if something's leaking from a nozzle, we'll be able to tell if maybe it left with a 4.5-inch NST nozzle, but now there's a 5-inch Stores nozzle on there. So maybe they didn't put the nozzle on correctly. If the shoe originally is leaking from the shoe and it had a 6-inch MJ shoe on there, but we go out there on the field and it has a 4-inch MJ shoe, we know someone has actually changed the hydrant as it's left the factory. And it just allows us to understand, what should have been there to begin with. Dan?
Right. So another example here on the screen, those that can see the screen. This indicator post is an older type, and actually this is an example of why Field Assist and what Dan's talking about really works. This was a gentleman trying to change the target for open and closed on there. The way it used to be, it was a little bit hard to work on. And if you get online on AmericanAVK.com and go to AVK support and then look up the manual, you'll see that we now have a newer version of this, primarily based on feedback. And, our engineers were able to design a really good system. And so Brandon's weighed in here a little bit with some comments. You can see it in the chat box. And we, again, really, really appreciate the feedback. And then, Dan, talking a little bit about, knowing the year of the hydrant, anything like that. What are things that the utility could let you know in advance before they call in, kind of have jotted down to help you troubleshoot quicker?
There's a lot of things we, like if they put on an extension kit, then we know, like, hey, maybe they didn't put it on right, or they didn't move a coupling or something like that. If they've got slam shut and they give us the year of the hydrant, we can tell you if it had the old main valve or the new main valve that has the hydroflow in it. If it's just spinning, a lot of times that's a brake coupling. And, just by telling us some of the things or the issues they're having, most of the time we can get a general idea of where the problem is.
Okay. Let's see, move on to another slide. So Mark, do you want to explain this one a little bit on the screen
Yeah.
here?
The thrust nut on the right side, basically what had happened was, I guess, whoops, can't go back to that. I guess what happened was accidentally the fire department was flow testing the hydrant and couldn't get any water out, so they continued to turn it on until the actual thrust nut actually came out of the hydrant. They didn't realize that there was no water going to the fire hydrant, that subdivision at the time. They just kind of continually turned it on until that actually came up out of the hydrant. So, yeah, go to the next one. The next one's very interesting too. This is a common occurrence that happens. This was a fire hydrant located in South Texas. That's actually a waterless extension, not an AVK extension. So one of the important things is when they're using parts or aftermarket products, just make sure you use the part that's right for the hydrant. The stem for the other manufacturer's hydrant wasn't the right size, and the coupling wasn't the right size. So when they tried to install it back together again, it was too tall. So they simply just put so much torque on it, they bent the stem trying to get it all back together again.
And conversely, if they were trying to put our parts on another brand of hydrant, it might, have
Do
a
the same
tolerance
thing.
issue as well.
Exactly.
So it's always best to check your manual and order OEM type parts. This is an example that is on the screen now where we had actually, believe it or not, I think it was like 21 hydrants that weren't draining back, and we tried to pull the main valve out of a hydrant and actually had to use like a crane to get enough torque to be able to pull this thing out. And what had happened, this is not the weep holes on this. This is an example from a highly corrosive area, but the weep hole here on the screen, in this case back behind, those were all plugged. And what we found out was the utility had actually poly wrapped the valves and the hydrant shoes and the line from the isolation valve to the hydrant and wrapped around the weep hole. And so they weren't draining back. And in situations like that, a lot of times you can get a hold of Dan, get a hold of me, get a hold of Mark. We have engineers almost always available as well. And we can kind of help you troubleshoot a little bit about, why things need to be done in a certain way or in a certain order. Here's another example. In our case, if you're trying to pull the bonnet off the hydrant, you need to remove a traveling stop nut. And as Dan mentioned earlier, we have videos online that show you how to disassemble the hydrant as well as the online maintenance manuals. If you do not remove that traveling stop nut and you're trying to, pull something up out of the ground there, you can see on the right here, they actually indented the ductile iron. So whatever they did, they were really putting some torque on it. This is another just real quick example I had up in northern Kansas where, the ground table, you can see the hydrant is kind of installed in a ditch line. So the weep holes were not plugged in. Groundwater was infiltrating the hydrant. So we used just a simple shop vac and were able to dewater a little bit and get the hydrant disassembled and get it repaired. Dan, do you want to explain a little bit about this photo?
This is in Springfield, Missouri, and they hired a contractor to do it, the install of the fire hydrants, and the contractor actually bootlegged the wrong hydrants in from another state. So when the job was done, these were all wrong, and consequently, we supported our product and we went out and replaced all these heads with the proper heads.
Yeah, so Dan and I were able to travel in. We spent 3 or 4 days there working on the hydrants, and this is another view of the way they install the hydrants. In many cases, it's a high-density polyethylene fused inlet base on the hydrant and the isolation valve, and they actually put everything together before they install it in the ground. And to back up a little bit, this is what we found out. Even though the hydrant looked like it matched their color, you can see they're not quite the same yellow. And then they actually were the wrong opening direction and some other specs as well. So Dan and I were able to actually travel in, and the city was very grateful and worked with us hand in hand. So that's an example. Here's a little bit different, not necessarily support, but we did go to a job site. The contractor, in this case, it wasn't a city, it was a contractor, and they were just installing, putting everything together before they buried it in the ground. And we kind of gave them a little bit of a walkthrough. And Dan, you can talk about this if you want. This is just a broken weather shield.
Broken weather shield. The nice thing about this is weather shield is only about a $40 part. So, you know, it protects that brass op nut down below. And so, yeah, it got broken, but it's a $40 part to fix and repair.
Yeah. Okay. And then, this is an example we've seen quite a bit of over the years as well. Sometimes you got highly corrosive areas, the gate valve wedge might be damaged or something like that. In this case, it's not our wedge, but if you get into a situation where you have a valve that's not operable, don't just dig it up and throw it away. Feel free to reach out to Dan or, any of the AVK staff, kind of give us an idea of what you're dealing with, and we'll help walk you through potential repairs that could be done quickly. Mark, you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, this is an example of on a fire hydrant's either open all the way or it's closed. This was on a job site, and the construction company was just barely opening up the hydrant just to get water off of the hydrant. So they didn't open up the hydrant enough to get the drain holes to stop. So after about a year, what had happened was the water had constantly flowed out of the hydrant underground as they were just barely getting water off of it. It actually elongated the weep hole to the point to where the hydrant would not shut off. And you could tell that that hole there is probably 4 times larger than it should be to actually cut it off. That's just a good example of to use a meter on a valve on the hydrant and open the hydrant all the way up and throttle it with a hydrant meter.
Okay. And on the left here, Mark, I guess what you've got is a hydrant that they put the extension kit
In the
on a
middle.
modern style in the
In the
middle.
modern style. And this is another example we were talking earlier about. Now we have the QR codes that a lot of guys don't like to read the instructions on the inside of it, but now we have QR codes. So if you're unfamiliar with how to put the extension kit on, this was our modern style hydrant that has the larger bonnet section, and the barrel section is much smaller. So instead of actually taking the entire hydrant off, they simply took the bonnet off and installed the extension kit between the lower body and the upper bonnet. So they had an awful lot of trouble opening and closing the hydrant. They wondered why it was very, very hard to open. We actually had to dig up the body itself and reinstall it in the proper position, and it worked. Another example on the right side is we go out to a hydrant and they say, well, the hydrant's shattering, it's slamming shut a little bit. We couldn't figure out why. Well, I guess they had lost one of the pins that hold the lower stem on, and they just they just basically took a hammer and a nail and nailed it on there, and the nail wasn't really big enough, so it actually had a lot of slack in it. So when they were opening and closing the hydrant, it shattered up and down. That's just an example of make sure you have the right parts, and if you lose them, don't just make something up.
Mark, this is an example here on the screen of probably a cast iron valve.
It is.
Go ahead.
It wasn't actually. This was actually in Texas, so it doesn't really freeze often. So it was not insulated, and it happened to one of the times in Texas it gets down to about 25 degrees, and the valve cracked. And they were wondering why it was leaking, and that was the reason why. It just wasn't insulated. And normally we don't get down to 25 degrees in Texas, but we happen to. And this is an example of one of the reasons we're always also making innovations on our fire hydrant. Whenever time we change a part to make it better, it's still retrofittable in all of our old hydrants. It doesn't mean that we never change the hydrant or we never look to see if we can make it better. And this is a case of that. On the left is our older upper stem. The upper stem had a little copper sheet that was crimped on the top, and that just protects your O-rings in your bonnet to keep the oil or grease from leaking out. If it was just a regular carbon steel stem, over the time it would rust and cause it to leak. So we used to crimp a piece of copper, which probably 99% of the other hydrants do also. But that's also a wear item. Over the years, the older the hydrant gets, you get water up inside there. it expands and contracts with the weather, causes it to crack. And you'll notice on the right, what happened is that little piece of copper actually broke off, and they were trying to open a hydrant, and it got caught up in the O-rings and made it incredibly difficult to open and close. The nice thing is we just used one of our brand new stainless steel one-piece upper stems. They threw the old one away, replaced the new stainless steel stem, and it worked perfectly. So that's just an example of how we do look and see how we can make our product better and make sure that it's retrofittable on all of our old products.
So Mark, I'm looking at the poll here. If the hydrant op nut turns, but the hydrant doesn't flow, water, what's the basic issue here? We've got a few people said broken op nut. We've got a broken main valve, and then the broken stem coupling, which is probably, Dan, do you want to weigh in on that? I'd say that's the most common, is the coupling.
Yeah, that's the most common when the op nut spins, but nothing's happening. Most of the time, it's a broken op nut, or it has something to do with that op nut. I had one 2 weeks ago, and the pin had completely fallen out. So the op nut wasn't connected to the lower stem, so it just spun.
Yeah, and a good way to troubleshoot that is if you open a hydrant, it just continues to spin. If you take the pumper nozzle off and you turn it and you see that the stem itself is not moving up or down, it's most likely all it's doing is just rotating. It's not moving up or down. It's most likely it has to be the coupling broken off.
Yeah, and Brandon had a good example here from the city of Waxahachie. He said, like, where they put the nail through the coupling and bent the nail, he said, sometimes you just got to get home at the end of the day. And that's kind of what that's the case of. So I agree with that. I've certainly been there on my side of it as well. Now, Mark, you can kind of explain a little bit here on the screen of what we're seeing at the right.
Yes, this was a hydrant that was actually my around my hometown. It was a hydrant that was incredibly hard to operate. Couldn't figure out what it was. We finally got it apart, and the upper stem slammed against one side. If you look down there, you can see the light reflecting on it. It's actually a coupon down inside the hydrant. And over the years, it had just kept going up. And when they turned the water on, it kept going up inside the hydrant. Sometimes it would fall down, sometimes it wouldn't. And it finally got stuck up inside there, and they simply couldn't turn the hydrant off or on. And you can see on the left, when we finally got it apart, we had to actually take another cheetah bar and drive that coupon back down inside the hydrant itself. But you can see what it did to the main valve because of all the years of just tearing it up.
Right. So that's a good point. If you've got a tapping valve nearby, you've tapped the line, and then, the next season you go out to do flow testing, and all of a sudden the hydrant, maybe was working when it was initially installed, but you've done a recent tap and it's flowed downstream to the dead end line, which is the hydrant. If it's suddenly not working, it could be something like that. We've seen quite a bit of different obstructions in the base of the hydrant, for sure. Moving on a little bit, this is an example I had in Missouri, not picking on anybody, but basically the hydrants are always a lot easier to work on when you don't dig them up. And Dan, here in a minute, I'll let you weigh in on this, but in this case, it was a very simple repair, but by the time we got there and it was in the shop, it's a little bit harder to work on them when they're not installed because they're not secured and anchored to the pipe. In this case, what we did, we actually took a backhoe, moved the hydrant over to our distributor's trailer, stood it up and secured it to the side of the trailer. And then I was able to stand on the trailer and disassemble the hydrant. And I think Mark and I, and probably Dan, we've all had to do this in some form or another, stand them up next to a track hoe or whatever to be able to work on them in a vertical position. Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, the hydrants are 10 times easier to work on vertically. And just to add to that, I've actually had guys dig it up, but leave the hydrant in the ground so you couldn't even get to it. So then they had to backfill, and then I come back day in a day, and then it's backfilled, and then you can get to the hydrant and fix it.
Yep. So those are important things just to be aware of. The other thing is, annually, when you're out doing hydrant inspections or valve exercising or hydrant exercising, flow testing, things like that, we kind of consider those to be the seasons when Dan would be most busy Utilities nationwide usually do flushing programs in the spring, annual inspections and things like that. And so, when that happens, we want you to be aware that if you're out doing a flow, like you see here on the screen now, you want to be able to reach Dan. Dan, you want to talk about this a little bit as far as the caps? They're a little bit like the weather shield.
Yeah, they're like the weather shield, and this one here actually got the nut broke off with a piece of equipment when they were installing it. And but it's easy fix in the field. You just replace the cap. And this one, I actually think it looks like it has the glass beads on it. So we had to special order that cap with the glass beads so it would reflect.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, it is a tad.
All right,
Yeah, and it is a tad crooked, Brandon.
It is a tad crooked.
Right. This is an example. If you're moving a valve, I think this was like a 36-inch gate valve, but be very careful. If you do happen to damage the pallet or the crating, just be aware. You could, if it's got a bypass, if it's got an actuator on it, anything like that. Be a little careful about how you move it around. And if you have any questions, definitely get a hold of us or get a hold of Dan or somebody and say, hey, I'm getting ready to move this thing. What's the best practice? Because otherwise, you could tear something up. One thing I wanted to make everybody aware of, we, in addition to what Dan's talking about during non-COVID times and as travel eases up a little bit, we do visit utilities, we attend conferences, things of that nature, and we have no problem putting on little short schools. Here's one I did in Charleston, South Carolina, I think about a year ago, just before COVID hit. So, we're able to come into the utility, and it doesn't matter if you've got 2 people or 200, we don't care. We'll set up the hydrant and, give you a thorough overview and a little short school on site. Move on here a little bit, see what my next one is. So basically, I guess, Mark, do you want to go back into the chat and read any of the feedback from Brandon?
Brandon actually had a good point. Always check your internals before you install, because there's no telling what falls out into it. I've gone out on a hydrant that we couldn't open or close, and they'd had a line break down the street, and they put plastic wrap on the pipe just to keep dirt and debris from getting in there, but it didn't keep the plastic wrap from getting in there. So it flowed all the way down to the hydrant one day and got stuck in the main valve. I pulled out rocks, debris, clothes, boards. Actually had a neoprene pig once come out of a fire hydrant that they thought they got all the pigs out, but they didn't get this.
Yeah. I pulled out a PVC lube bucket one time that had gotten wrapped around the main valve, and just certain times when they would flow the hydrant, the bucket would get up against the main valve and it would make a terrible noise. Other times it wouldn't do it at all, so they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the hydrant. But what everybody needs to understand, hydrants are really not, they're not like a person. They don't just all of a sudden get sick. There's usually a cause and effect, and we can help you out with that.
Yeah, and one of the main things. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mark.
No, I'll say one of the main things I always tell people is, if you, like you said, it normally doesn't just get sick. If you've always worked the hydrant and all of a sudden one day you simply can't close it, don't crush it down as hard as you can. There's most likely going to be something down inside of it. Closing it down as hard as you can just to crush it shut will maybe only be a temporary fix, and eventually it's going to start leaking again.
Yeah, I got a 12-inch ductile iron pipe gasket one time wrapped around the main valve, and it was just one of the craziest things I've ever seen, because when you would try to pull it up out of the hydrant, there was just all this tension on it. But Dan, do you have anything else to add today?
Yeah, I had one that was installed for 3 or 4 years, and they loved all the hydrants. And they said the one at the airport was just really hard to operate from day one. I said, well, let's go take a look out there. And we ran out there. There was a rag, there was a plastic bag, and a gasket all wrapped around that main valve. And the funny part was it was still working. It was opening and closing. It was their complaint that it was hard to operate. So,
wow.
Yeah, we cleaned it all up and put a new main valve in there, and it worked like a dream.
Well, good. Well, I think this pretty much is going to wrap it up today. We'll stay online for a while. Brandon, we obviously really appreciate you being here today, and everybody else that's on. And again, those of you that can see on the screen here, you can register for upcoming webinars. June 22nd, we have one coming up. And, you know, anybody that participates in the Tailgate Talk again gets the hat and the shirt. And some of the people called there a week or so ago and said, hey, you know, I need a hat. If you're a guest on the show and you're, you know, actually speaking or something in that nature, you'll be allowed to get the hat. So anyway, the other thing I had for you in addition to registering is, again, Dan Haptonstall's contact information here. And, you know, Brandon's given some additional comments here, but feel free to reach out to us. Mark, anything else to add?
No, I think that, Dan's a great asset, and he's been with the company so long, if he can we can figure it out what it is fairly easy.
Yep, I agree. The other thing we have, you know, for utilities is we understand that, you know, these type of situations don't just occur between 8 and 5. So we know, you know, it can be in the evening, it can be on a weekend or even a holiday. Those of us that have been at the utility realize that's usually when it happens. So go ahead, Dan, any comments on that?
There's my name and number, and please write it down. I mean, that's what I'm here for, to help you guys out and really support our product. And, you know, I've been doing this since '82, and it doesn't even have to be about this. It might just be a question that is something else. And, you know, we try to do our best to help everybody out there.
Yeah, we had one, I think it was either yesterday or Friday, where, you know, the distributor just had a question about, you know, installing the hydrant. It happened to be one with the Hymex connection on it, and they wanted to know the torque. And we do have a sticker on the hydrant inlet that gives the torque, but, you know, the guy wanted to make sure. And Dan, people like that are always available to help out and answer those questions. So. All right. Well, I guess that's it for now. We'll have, you know, some additional comments in here, and, you know, feel free to ask anything, get a hold of us later if you have any questions or comments as well.